Hello, and once again, we're online with Light. This is Nick Ives, and I am here with none other than Right Worshipful Brother Jim Saraceni. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning, Right Worshipful Brother Nick. Happy to be with you.
And so one of the things we're trying to do is get people to know some of the Grand Line officers, who they are, what they do, what their history is, and maybe it applies to you. And I'm always looking for more interviews as well. So if you enjoy watching this and you have a story to tell, please hit me up in my email, nickives@ctfreemasons.net. And so, Jim, can you just tell us right now, what is your position in Grand Lodge currently? And we'll start there. What's your position? What do you do?
So currently I am the Grand Senior Steward and a member of the Grand Lodge Officers Corps.
And you've been the Grand Junior Steward and now the Grand Senior Stewards. That's a 2-year commitment so far, but maybe a few more later.
So I'm very humbled to have been asked to continue on. So next year I would move up to the Marshal's position.
And that's a little bit different in Grand Lodge. I know it confuses. I'm currently the Grand Marshal, and it's like
Yes.
a little zigzag than what we're used to. And so I do know you're going to have to do some announcing in the second half of Grand Lodge in April. Is that right?
Yes. And I'm sure you'll tell me what I need to say.
I can tell you, as doing it last time, I was very concerned about pronouncing names. So good luck with that.
Thanks.
I do the morning at least. So, Jim, let's go back to the beginning here. You have a cool career in law enforcement and in law. And at some point along the line, you decided, you know what? I think I'm going to add to my life a little bit by becoming a Mason. Could you tell us a little about that decision?
Sure. So just very quickly, I was a police officer for 27 years. I put myself through law school, currently a practicing attorney. My Masonic career actually began probably 2 years before my actual joining of Masonry. I was at a business conference with a gentleman and from the Norwalk area, and he handed me a pamphlet. And the pamphlet was something from the Grand Lodge, and it's called Brother to Brother. And it explains just a little bit about Masonry. It talks about who some famous Masons were. And it was interesting, but it wasn't the right time for me. But it planted a seed. Now you fast forward a couple of years, and I was at a party with a couple of my bosses from the police department. It was a casual pool party, and they started talking about Masonry, and I expressed a curiosity. Looking back on it now, I should have been aware that a blue petition suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and they told me, sign here. And there was an interesting piece there because I was hesitating, and one of my former lieutenants said to me, you know, you have children, and your children could be anywhere in the world, and if they need assistance, they can knock on the door of a lodge. We have lodges all over the world. And I found that very interesting. And frankly, that was the part that made me take that next step and sign that petition. And I'll talk about a couple of experiences about that later. But I joined Ark Lodge 39 over in Danbury. We made my first step into Masonry, and then I did nothing for 1.5 years. I don't even recall if I went to lodge more than 1 or 2 times, but the person who recommended me, he kept working with me, and eventually I said, okay, I'm ready. And so, like I said, 1.5 years later, I took that second step, and then less than 30 days after that, I took the third step and became a Master Mason. And so I say it's in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. And as I became more involved, I realized how much I enjoyed Masonry. From there, you know, there's a saying we have about, you know, you were brought to the door of the lodge by a friend who you found to be a brother. But there's a second piece to that. You met a number of brothers who now have discovered are friends. And I think that's one of the best or greatest things that I've enjoyed was meeting these brothers, good men all, and becoming friends with them. And that's, I think, one of the things I look forward to on meeting nights or even when we have other events. So you're not just going to a Masonic meeting, although those are very important and enjoyable, but you're going to be with your friends.
And could you tell me a little bit about Ark Lodge? I know every lodge has a spirit. And I know, my mother lodge is Meridian Lodge 77, and I'm a member of a number of other lodges. Each one's unique. Tell us a little bit about Ark Lodge.
So Ark Lodge goes back into the Revolutionary War, and actually the encampment down in the Georgetown area is where it was the officers mostly had a lodge, and they would, from what I understand, they would parade through town and have parades and announce themselves. From there, they established the lodge in Georgetown. As many lodges have found, it was very expensive to maintain a building. So what they did was they did sell the building. Many of the members became brothers they moved the lodge to Danbury. So Danbury has two lodges, has Union Lodge number 40. They own the building on Main Street, just a little south of the police station, and Ark Lodge rents from them. And so, of course, we have great fraternal relations, sometimes competition with the brothers from Union Lodge. And we have gone forward from there. I think I should know the number off, but it formed back in the 1700s, I believe it was.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. And so, and the exciting part was Union Lodge itself, building was 100 years old this year. And they took, the master found a cornerstone, and they with a time capsule in it. And they took the time capsule out and opened it up, and all sorts of treasures in there. A lot of, they had the front page of the newspaper from the day, special made. They had coins, they had notes, they had Grand Lodge memorabilia. It was very exciting. Very exciting.
Now, does that make you Geraldo Rivera in Al Capone's vault?
No, listen, I was taking, and we were teasing the master of Union Lodge that we were afraid there would be water infiltration. And when he opened it, it would be nothing but, some mushy papers, and he would be the Geraldo Rivera of Masonry.
Well, that seems pretty, and I really like how you mentioned brothers working together out there. That's something that's happening throughout the state, and I appreciate all the cooperation, which is really what we're supposed to be about. Now, at some point, you decided, you know what, I want to do a little bit more. I want to become an officer in Ark Lodge. And can you talk a little bit about that step and what that was like for you?
So I like to say that, we've used the term in the past about being voluntold. And I guess it was that my natural tendency was to, based on what I was trained by my parents, you get up and you help. So meal would be over, I'd get up and help clear, do the dishes, things of that nature. And they asked me to join the line of officers. And of course, you start at the bottom as a steward, where you help with the meals and you help with cleanup. And from there, you move forward through the different chairs. Now, one of the things I found important was, I think each chair that you go through teaches you something. And, there's a new lesson to be learned in each chair. And that lesson is different for everybody. Of course, at some point then, I went into some of the elected chairs and had more responsibilities in the lodge, ultimately ending up as master of the lodge.
And that's a big step. I know a lot of people get nervous about being the boss, because in Masonry, the master has a lot of responsibility. Could you tell us a little bit about what it felt like to assume the responsibility of such an old lodge and to govern it forward?
So one of the exciting things, when I became a master mason, there were two brothers who have become very good friends, Mike Slitch and Paul Moncues. And I was fortunate that they were both better masons than I was. And so I could follow them. And Paul went through his master first, with Mike right behind him and me behind Mike. And as I went forward, I had the benefit of watching them. But yes, it is a big step. I will mention that I always tease that I was very fortunate when I became master of the lodge. I was installed by Most Worshipful Past Grand Master Charles Yo, and Most Worshipful Brother, and his name is escaping me right now, and I apologize to him, but I also had Most Worshipful Brother Gail Smith in attendance. So I had 3 Grand Masters at my installation, which is one of my favorite pictures. And so one of the things I said when I accepted the position or was installed, I found that Masonry replaced the camaraderie of the locker room at the police department. But then I'd retired. You don't see people on an everyday basis. Kind of, not that you lose touch. They're still your friends. You lose touch. But that camaraderie of the lodge replaced that locker room camaraderie. Now, as far as the burdens of being a master, it is definitely manageable. We all make mistakes. Again, with the idea that each chair teaches you something, when you become the master of a lodge, there are a lot of things that you will learn. And again, everybody will learn different things. Fortunate for me, in addition to having Paul Moncues and Mike Slitch, we had very active past masters, and they were always more than willing to give me their advice. And Nick, you're laughing, and we all know that past masters will always tell you, in my day, but it was helpful. They helped enormously. And I was fortunate. I felt I had my first time, because I actually been master twice. We had a fairly active year. Between Paul, Mike, and myself, we established some new directives, new directions. We started a Scotch and Cigar Night, which to this day is an annual event. We participated in Georgetown Day. So going forward then, we had a couple of brothers moved, and we had an opening in the lodge line of officers, knowing we didn't want some of our younger brothers to skip any of those chairs because there were important lessons to be learned. And I've always felt it was really cool that Paul, Mike, and myself stepped in, and we went back through the line as first, second, third, and passed through. Now, my second term was COVID, and certainly felt I was glad that it was me, because I'd already had a full year as master. So that year's master was not going to be getting cheated out of all the things you would normally do. I also had good relations with the past masters. We had good communication, talking about what we're going to do step by step. And so my second year, I think the biggest accomplishment was we were able to keep in touch with each other. We were able to have some meetings with social distancing and kept everybody involved.
And I can definitely say that I felt the COVID year, it was hard on everybody in a lot of ways. Like you're saying, like, how do you stay connected when you're not allowed to connect? And it made us rethink a lot of things. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to just dial back. You mentioned the police locker room, and I'm not a policeman, and I was not in the military, but I was in a college fraternity. And I can say that I came back out of college, I went to work, and I'm a school teacher. I didn't feel the locker room feel, or like the fraternity feel at all. And I had that same experience. And I can say that just kind of being in a group of men that can, work together, and it's not always perfect, trust me, but, the idea that we all kind of are cohesive, I felt very comfortable in a Masonic environment. And I don't know if you could speak to, how that translated for you. For me, it was great that we had a bunch of people doing all the same project together. Like we're all on the same team. Like, all right, we want to do this event. Let's all do it together. That to me, it was very cool. I don't know. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? I know it's a side connection.
No,
but
it's fine, because actually I would say one of the more successful things we did as a lodge. So Mike Slitch sort of spearheaded the Georgetown Day, where they had a sort of a street fair, and we had 2 booths. Part of what our plan was, we sold hamburgers, hot dogs, but we gave out Masonic literature to all adult males. We made a mistake. We forgot to put our contact information on it. So if anybody out there uses those, make sure you put your contact information. But Mike had set up, it was I believe 2-day event, and Mike set up 4 hours, or it was a 1-day event, and Mike set up 4-hour blocks for the brothers, so nobody had to stay there from 8 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. What we found is the brothers all came early and nobody left, because it was enjoyable. We were having fun together as brothers. And I think, there's a trite saying, nothing succeeds like success. It was very successful, built a lot of bonds between the brothers working together on a project and having it come to fruition and be successful. And that's just one thing that we've done. And we've had fundraisers. We were able to give money to different organizations. Particularly at one point, it was just getting started. It was the Scotty Fund. There was the Dream Come True, and also the pantry in Danbury gave sizable donations to them.
That's fantastic. And you talk a lot about Danbury and Arc Lodge. At some point, you kind of had a broader view. You became a district deputy, the purple, in our fraternity, the purple. And you are in District 2, which for those who don't know well, that's the northwest part of the state. Could you talk a little about what the spirit of District 2 is like, just like your lodge? Now you're seeing it from a bigger perspective. And what was your role in that?
So my first year in District 2 is broken up into 2 different sections. Is District 2A, and that covers Montgomery Lodge up in Lakeville, St. Peter's Lodge in New Milford, and St. Luke's up in Kent. And then my second year, I was in 2B, which covered Jerusalem Lodge over in Ridgefield, Union Lodge in Danbury, Ark Lodge in Danbury, and also Hiram Lodge over in Sandy Hook. One of the first things I realized is how proud brothers are of their lodges, their buildings. Without fail, on your first visit, they want to give you a tour of their lodge. And every lodge is a little bit different, and there's memorabilia going back hundreds of years that is all around you, and it's really exciting and neat. You go from a Union Lodge, Ark Lodge, where it's a very big lodge room with almost 100 seats, to some of the smaller lodges where there's maybe 30, 40 seats. Ark Lodge has a high ceiling, 20, 30 feet up in the air, and some of the lodges, it's a room. The interesting part is each lodge does have its own spirit, if you will, and particularly down in 2B, we are more the same. It's people showing up after work, more business, more cosmopolitan, if you will. And then up in the 2A, it is more, I would say, St. Peter's and New Milford is more like B. But then you have Kent, St. Luke's and Kent, and Montgomery, which is more of a rural. I remember my first trips up to Montgomery. You learn a lesson. I was running late. I was running low on gas. Didn't want to stop for gas because I figured I'll just get it when I leave. Went, participated, left. There's a lot of farmland out there, and there are no gas stations. I finally saw a light in the distance and pulled in. It was a bus depot. I thought it was a gas station. And they said, well, no, there's a gas station about 2 miles up the hill. And the fact that it was up the hill scared me because I'd been running on fumes for a while. I probably skated in there with an eyedropper of gas. But again, I'll use an example. I was up in Montgomery, and we were sitting down having dinner, and I was next to two brothers, one of whom, a wonderful man, Bobby Thompson, who's been Master Lodge multiple times, who I consider a good friend. And he was sitting next to another brother, and they were talking about their crops. They were talking about planting and the weather. And then you would be down in 2B, and they had a meeting talking about finances. And so it was a big difference. But when we're all together, because every other month, of course, we have Blue Lodge Council, where we all come together. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from, we're all brothers, And District 2 has weathered some storms, but is vibrant and exciting in different ways. Montgomery has their lobster sale for several weekends, and they sell hundreds of lobsters for like 6 weekends in a row to the people in their town who are excited and waiting. And then, of course, you have St. Luke's, where they have the machinery show, and they sell the roast beef sandwiches. And I don't mean to leave other lodges out, but everyone does a little something in their community, and the brothers all pitch in. And again, I think it goes back to the Georgetown day that we had. You work together, and there's a sense of accomplishment.
That's awesome. And I can say I've been to, I gave a talk at Jerusalem once, and I couldn't find it at first. It was right in the middle of town. And I remember they came down to find me, and they're like, no, we're in this. Oh, great. And it was like hidden in plain sight. And it was really cool. Like, in Harry Potter, when like the door opens out of nowhere. I was like, oh, it was here the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
Very cool. And I've been to St. Peter's quite a few times. I really enjoy that. I've been invited there quite a bit. We did a seminar there. So very cool. There's so much going on in District 2. You are also, you have another role, and this is not directly connected to your Grand Lodge role, but pretty close. You're co-chair of the Legal Matters Committee. As someone, a chair of the Education Committee, and we have our job, and then Legal Matters has their job. Could you talk a little about what the job the Legal Matters Committee is? And it's a tough one. I mean, I see what you do, and it's not easy.
Yes, and I was very fortunate to be asked to join the committee, and this past year, the Grand Master made me co-chair with Brian Beals, who's a wonderful brother, and I think we complement each other well, in that Brian has a deep history and knows the rules and regulations. He amazes me sometimes. He pulls these rules and regs right off his top of his head. And of course, when we have legal issues that come up, I can bring some of my legal expertise. And that's not to say I'm alone, because we have some wonderful brothers that are also attorneys that are part of the Committee on Legal Matters. I think the important thing for people to realize is the Grand Lodge is a big business. And like any business, we're not for profit, of course, but like any business, there are decisions that have to be made that have legal ramifications. things come up from time to time where the Grand Master will look to you for some advice. And the great part, of course, is having a rich history of brothers coming from different backgrounds. We've had to deal with issues such as background checks. That was one of the first things I had to work on with the blue wave and more people coming in through electronics. We didn't know their backgrounds as much as in the past, where there was always somebody who said, oh, I've known this guy for 15, 20 years. So now we had to think about, how do we protect from having people who really should not be part of us, criminal backgrounds, people who might be a danger to children. And we had to work on a system that could be duplicated throughout the Grand Lodge, that was not too cumbersome, but also there were issues that we had to be careful not to infringe upon people's privacy. So that was like almost a 6-8 month project of hammering that out, getting feedback from different sections. And of course, a lot of times people have different opinions, and you have to sort of be mindful of how they do things. Oftentimes I say, as Masons, we do the same thing differently throughout the realm.
And you're telling me that attorneys sometimes disagree with each other? I mean, that doesn't happen, right?
No, there's an old joke that there was an attorney in an old western town, and he barely could make a living. And then another attorney opened up across the street, and the both of them are doing quite well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, what to you is your favorite part of Masonry? Like, if I could say to you, okay, this is what you're going to do with Masonry, like, what's your favorite thing? If you have one event or something, and you just say, this is what I would love to do with Masonry the most, what is it?
So I would say there's two parts. The one part that initially attracted me was history. A little bit of, history buff. One thing that really attracted me was that the obligations and the ceremonies that I partook or was a participant in to become a Mason and move forward as a Mason were the same obligations, the same things that people like George Washington did. It's the same going back. I mean, of course, there's minor variations, but it was exciting to me that, I took the same obligation that George Washington took. And then, of course, learning about the history of Masonry going back into the Middle Ages has been exciting. And, of course, you always learn more along the way. One of the things, of course, that people don't realize is that a lot of things that we say every day as Masons, or not as Masons, things we say every day, just regular citizens, have a history or a beginning in Masonry. I'll just use one. You talk about somebody and say, oh, he's on the level. Well, as Masons, we all meet on the level. And what that means is it doesn't matter what your status in life is. It doesn't mean how rich or poor or position you hold. When we're in lodge together, we are all equals, but also we know each other to be honest, good men. And that now gets used in the common public as he's on the level. You can trust him. And that's just one example. There are many others that I won't bore everybody with, but you see these things. They're right there in plain sight, and you don't realize that they have a Masonic background, a Masonic history. Now, the other part for me, I would say, is the camaraderie. At the end of the day, or, Arc Lodge, even though we meet officially 2 times a month on the second and fourth Monday at 7:30 at 337 Main Street, if you're in the area. On the off Wednesdays, the Wednesdays we don't meet, the brothers will come to the lodge and we'll associate with each other. Sometimes we'll put on a movie. Most of the time we'll just gather. Now, we have an interesting lodge in that the building, being 100 years old, originally had a coal-fired furnace. And of course, that's been replaced. But across from it was the coal bunker. What we did is we sandblasted it, we cleaned it up, we sealed it, and we turned it into a cigar smoking room. We have a fan and we have a smoke eater because a lot of the brothers enjoy sitting and having a cigar. The really neat part was there was some furniture from a lodge that unfortunately had folded up. So we set the smoking room up with the old lodge furniture as if it were a lodge room. And so we'll go down there and we'll just enjoy ourselves. And most of the time, it's just a lot of laughter and just having fun.
That sounds really cool. That seems like when I pictured Masonry, when I was joining, I figured every lodge had one of those rooms. But it's not true, but I pictured they all had it. If you had to say today, and you're in a leadership role, and obviously we hope you continue in that role, what is the future of Masonry? So what do you see the next 10, 15 years of Masonry look like? I mean, look, the world has changed dramatically. How do you see Masonry playing a strong role in that new world?
I think it's evolving. I think we've gone through a period. Initially, of course, we had many more Masons than we have now. With the current lifestyle we all lead, fortunately, has become a home to work society. And a lot of fraternal or civic organizations have suffered losses and diminished memberships, diminished roles in the community. But I see the corner turning a little bit because people are looking for those associations. They're looking for something more in their life rather than just the home to work. And, without exception, and I should mention this, Masonry, for the most part, is extremely affordable. The yearly dues are, I think the most I've ever heard was like 200 or a little bit more per year. And so it's an affordable way to have those associations, to improve yourself, to do good things. Again, everyone comes to it for a different reason. Some people want to find an outlet where they can do good works in the community. And of course, you can do that through Masonry. In our lodge, if you have an idea where you'd like to do something, present it, and other brothers may get on board. The next thing you know, you're donating $1,000 to the food pantry.
And that's a great feeling for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll say, as we start to wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to give a shout out to anybody. And I noticed earlier on you mentioned something about when your daughters could go to any lodge and get a little help. I was wondering if you could maybe give a shout out to maybe what time then they did.
Certainly. And it was amazing. So, here I am, I'm told, well, your kids, could go anywhere. My kids were little at the time. Fast forward, my daughter's going to college in Daytona at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical. She has a problem with her car. One of the lodge brothers tried to help out with the local Jeep dealership. It didn't work out because the part wasn't no longer manufactured, and she had to go to a local mechanic. Well, here's a 20-year-old girl. I was, don't want to send her to just any mechanic. I called a local lodge, and I said, hey, who do you guys recommend? And they said, oh, we have a brother who has a machine shop behind his house. Called him up, and originally she'd been quoted about $1,300 for the problem with her shifter, plus there was an issue with her air conditioning. So I called the brother. By the way, Al Baker, God bless you, sir. And so he had me send him the codes from the scan that was done, told me, all right, you knew what part, and I had my daughter deliver the car, and I asked how much, and he said, give me $800 to buy the part. She fortunately was a spring break, so she went to visit a friend at another college. He worked on the car, calls me up, he goes, craziest thing, the part doesn't work. So he and another gentleman, I'm going to guess it probably was another brother, went to the junkyard. They retrieved the part out of a wreck. He calls me up and says, hey, it's working. I drove it 20 miles, didn't have any trouble. Oh, the air conditioner was a small part. I have a machine shop. I just made the part and fixed it. So I said, okay, well, my daughter's going to be back. Come get the car. And how much should she bring with her? Because, we paid $800 for the part. And he thought about it. And he goes, well, I sent the part back and I got a reimbursement for the part. He goes, when she gets here, I'll give her $100 back. And I was astounded. Fast forward, we did eventually get rid of that car. Daughter needed a car. Being a 21-year-old girl, I told her what the budget was. And of course, she kept finding vehicles that were above the budget. She calls me up. She had one of her engineering friends go with her. They found a wonderful car, and she was $2,000 short. And I said, I just don't have that to give you. She calls me back. It was a used car lot. The owner was the salesman. And she saw a ring with a Masonic insignia on it. And she said to him, hey, that's a neat Masonic ring you're wearing. And he looked at her and he said, well, what do you know about Masonry? And she said, my dad's a Mason in Connecticut. And he said, okay, what we're going to do, you're going to give me the money you have for the car. And for the next 10 months, you're going to give me a check for $200 to cover the difference. Now, no background checks. I mean, she was a full-time student waiting tables for some food money to help dad out. And, so no credit, no signed documents. I was a Mason, and he trusted that as a Mason, we would keep our word. And better believe that we made sure on the first of every month that check was there for him. It put her in a car that was better than I could have afforded at the time. Now, I do have to caveat it. They always say, and your personal experience may differ. But and then as far as a shout out, I will say that, Brother Jeff Finch. Well, first of all, let me go back. Charlie Peterson, he was the one who handed me that pamphlet from St. John's down in Westport. And I had looked him up. Unfortunately, I'd only been a brother for about a year when he passed away, so I never had an opportunity to really thank him for planting that seed. And then from there, of course, Jeff Finch, who was the secretary of Ark Lodge for 20 plus years, I believe, just the patience to wait for me to wake up and move forward. And then, of course, many other brothers along the way, but certainly my relationship with Paul Moncuse and Mike Slitch, we've become very close, and we have that special bond that we went through and in order 2 times, just as something special. Mike has moved out of the area, still an active Mason. I call him at least every 2 to 3 weeks, or he'll call me, and just friendship. We're both NASCAR fans. I mentioned Daytona 500, and he said, anytime you're ready to go, you got a bedroom here in Florida. So you make these lifelong connections. And so I would say that. Of course, I would also give a shout out to Most Worshipful Past Grand Master Joe Porco. He is the one who helped lead me into the Grand Lodge and becoming an officer there. And that's been a rewarding experience. And I will say something. I'm not just saying this because you're going to edit this and make me look good. But just like I followed Paul Moncuse and Mike Slitch and had a good example in front of me, you are the officer directly in front of me. So I have a good example to follow, and I'm counting on you to tell me what to do next year.
Well, I highly appreciate you saying it, but I just, since we're having this conversation very publicly, I really enjoy having you behind me in the line, and it's been a great relationship so far, and I look forward to whatever happens next. So thank you for saying that. And I always end with this question. If you could go back to yourself, all the way back when that first moment, that first interested moment, what would you say to yourself thinking about knocking on the door? I know some people watching this are not Masons doing that same exact thing. What would you say to yourself to get you inspired for Masonry?
So going back to something I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And I would have told myself to move forward sooner, quicker. There is a hesitation because you don't know what's going. You don't know what the degrees and what waits beyond that door. And a lot of us are. I was very concerned. I'll be very honest. My only thoughts about fraternities were this hazing, and I didn't want anything to do with that. But I was assured, and I found it to be true, that you're not going to do anything that's going to embarrass you or put you in a bad light. What actually happens is the brothers in the lodge are actually putting on a play, not to you, but for you, so that you can learn. And that hesitancy to knock on the door and take that next step because you don't know what waits beyond, it's nothing but good things.
That's awesome. I can't agree more. And I want to thank you for doing this interview. I hope everyone watching got to learn a little bit about Right Worship Brother Jim. And whether you're in District 2 or anywhere in the state, he's a great resource. Reach out to him and he'll have an answer. And if he doesn't have an answer, he'll find one. And especially at the legal realm, that's, he's really good at that. So thank you so much for doing the interview, Jim. And I know that we're filming this on a mild little snow day. We had a little snow and wind. So stay warm out there and no frostbite. If I come back with no nose, I'll be like the guy in Fallout.
There you go.
I was out there too long.
I do have a driveway waiting for me. So
yeah, me too.
All right. Thank you for doing these, so we have an opportunity to speak to all the brothers in the craft.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we're Online with Light. We'll catch you next time with someone else. And if you want to interview, Nick Ives at ctfreemasons.net. Thanks a lot.